Hey, this is Jesse Cates from the rock band The Sexy Accident out of Kansas City, Missouri. I've put together this video for you to showcase some high-end mics that you can use for electric guitar recording, and also to talk through some technical aspects of the recording process that you might overlook if you're new to self-producing electric guitars at home. I've got a Gibson SG, left-handed, got it used on reverb. It's got a toasted maple fretboard, it's got your typical mahogany body, solid finish, stacked Fralin P90 in the bridge position, which is a very warm pickup, not a lot of snap to it, but a little more snap than a humbucker. And I use a very, very bright pick. So this is a Clayton Ultim pick, very thin, very snappy. So even though it's a pretty warm guitar, that's gonna give it some brightness. I use heavy strings, and this guitar is tuned all the way down to D, so every string is down a full step. So you're not going to necessarily be able to get a sound or even want to get a sound that's exactly like this, but I wanted you to know what you're hearing before we do the mic comparisons. Now, that said, since you're taking the same signal, I'm using a reamped signal, into the amp every time with the different mics, you really are going to hear the difference of these mics and not just the difference in me playing. So to do my takes, I'm taking my Apogee Element 24, which is my interface that I use for recording everything. It's got 2 channels in, but that's plenty if you're working at home and you're only doing vocals and guitars. I do a DI track from the guitar direct into here. I perfect that take. I use an amp sim. I've been using GarageBand because it sounds plenty good for getting my take right. I'm trying to divide myself into multiple people. I'm trying to be a performer first and then worry about the engineering later as a second version of me. So right now I'm being the performer. I do my DI take directly into the Apogee, into the mic input. I don't use a fancy mic pre because I'm not trying to color it yet. When it's time to go hit the amp, I go out of the back of here, route it out at -10 dBV, not the full line level. If you come out at full line level, it'll be too hot for your amplifier. And a lot of boxes will give you a volume knob to try to attenuate that physically with the box. That's fine, but if your interface can switch down to -10, you can make that adjustment before you hit any analog electronics and keep your signal a little bit more pure. I'm also going at that output into this little isolation box. This is a transformer passive split box, but I'm not using it to split. I'm using it to hit that isolation transformer, go from a balanced signal back to an unbalanced signal. So to do that on this particular box, I go into the isolation output, then I go from the input into the amp. And again, I'm doing that just to get an isolation transformer which prevents ground loops. So any kind of buzzing or humming, that's being removed. So because of this box, I have a nice clean signal going to the amp, and it's as if I'm playing it for the first time, or very close to that. So the next step in the chain, obviously, is the amplifier and speaker cab. I don't have the amp here right now that I use to record these samples because it's at my drummer's house because we've been doing streaming concerts on Reddit. But it's an 18-watt Marshall clone. It's of no particular name. It's a nice little amp. It's a Marshall style. It's pretty hairy. You'll hear that. And then I sent it out to this bootleg home-built 210 cabinet. Cabinet quality, I don't sweat it too much. Just want it to be solid, not have rattles. But I've got some nice speakers in here. And let me tell you, the quickest way to change your guitar sound is the speaker. Does more than anything. Dr. Z, famous amp builder, says the same. You don't like your sound? If you got a couple different speakers, you can swap them out, change your sound dramatically. But this one's loaded with 2 10-inch greenback Celestions, current production, made in the UK. Don't know if that matters, but they sound nice. They're bright, they're articulate, but they've still got some of that woody heft that is the hallmark of a greenback. And because they're 10-inch, they're a little quieter, which, as I'll talk about later, can matter depending on the mic you're using. If you don't want to use an SM57 or a dynamic and you want to go higher end, sometimes the level can matter. You don't want to fry those mics. So got 2 10s, the volume is being split in half. Here's something to think about. You want to get this cab off the ground. The reason for that is if your microphone is 6 inches away from the speaker, which is a big if, a lot of people record right up. That's not what I do. I want to have a little air there. And I do that because I don't want to be overwhelmed with bass signal, and I want to get clarity of the high end. If you're going to do that, if you're going to get anywhere away from that grill, now all of a sudden you got to worry about reflections from the floor, because when I'm right up on the grill, that floor, even if I'm only a couple inches away, is pretty far in comparison to the cone. So the strength of the reflections coming off the floor is going to be kind of weak. If I'm further back, all of a sudden that ratio is different. If I'm right on the floor, the reflection can be almost the same distance, which means the same strength. It's going to be audibly kind of boxy sounding. So what I do is I make sure I'm off the ground. I'm also using the higher of the two speakers, which also happens to be the better sounding of the two speakers. And I hate to tell you this, but that's a thing too. If you've got 5 of the same speaker from Celestion, every single one of them is going to sound different. And if you're a nutcase like me, you're going to take the time to figure out which one sounds best. I know that this one up top is brighter and clearer. The one on the bottom sounds good too, as a good alternate, but I like the sound of the one on top better. And so that's what I used for this shootout, because I was trying to understand my microphones. Now, this assembly of mics that I've got is a little atypical. I've got an AEA N22 active ribbon mic, beautiful microphone, very full range, designed to record up close. What that means is they've created resonances in this little chamber where the high end is a little bit exaggerated in a good, natural sounding way, so that this naturally bassy ribbon element isn't going to overwhelm you with bass signal when you record an electric guitar. The second mic I want to show you is a Microtech Gefell UMT70S. If you've read anything about the company, you'll know that it comes from the Neumann lineage of mics. It's a very nice condenser. I did not get this primarily for guitar recording. That would be silly. This is my vocal mic. This is my percussion mic. This is my everything I want a condenser for mic. I use it for mid-side recording sometimes, which is a cool technique for another time. But it's also a good bright mic if you're recording electric guitar. I'll talk about that whole bright-dark pairing topic shortly. One of the reasons I have a second ribbon mic is my other guitarist was flying in parts for me to reamp for him. He could send me DI guitar signals, and during the pandemic, I could take his DI track, reamp it out, and get a completely different sound for his guitar. This is a AEA KU5A supercardioid ribbon mic active. Also pretty odd. Definitely not a flat mic. I love this thing. I think it's got a lot of character. I think it's got its own sound. I think it does not sound like a full response flat ribbon mic. It's got something cool going on. It also, if you're interested, happens to be the best mic I've found for things like glockenspiel and tuned percussion, because it has a natural way of rounding out the attack and making things sound not too bright, but still present and still percussive. This is an SM7B, very much like an SM57, but not the same. Actually tuned to be more flat, so they take the natural response of the 57 and tame it and make it a little more flat. I think it makes a very nice guitar mic, gets a little more low end than a 57, which if you're recording straight on the cone, like I like to do, is better. 57 can sound a little telephony and tinny and over bright if you record straight on the cone at a couple inches away. sE8 condenser mic. This is a small diaphragm condenser. I've never seen a mic shootout featuring it. It's very flat. It's got a good percussive response. It is not overhyped for a small diaphragm condenser. It is bright. It's a good companion mic. Just to add, even though I don't have them in my lap, I have recordings of the SM57 and the Revox M3500, which is a more unusual dynamic mic that I picked up on eBay. Next up, we have our first combination. This is the AEA N22 Nouveau. Sorry, I had it backwards. With the Gefell UMT70S. For whatever reason, these two mics, using this amp and guitar and speaker, sound really nice together. And I think I'm finding that they're good buddies at all times if I'm trying to do guitar sounds. So this is the two of them together. What I typically do, and what I think I'll do in this example, is I take most of the sound from the N22 and then a bit from the Gefell. And for our second and final combination of microphones, I've got the KU5A from AEA, which is a pretty cool sound on its own, combined with, of all things, this sE8 small diaphragm condenser mic. What's great about doing a pair like this is you could take most of your sound from the ribbon, dial in a little bit of brightness boost from the condenser, mix to taste, and I'm not mixing, but I hand both of these to my mix engineer, and he can make whatever adjustments he needs. Here you get the combination of two, most of the sound coming from the KU5A. I don't find that any of these dynamics work real great as pair mics. The pairing thing for the ribbon plus a condenser, I think sounds really great. The dynamics, to me, are a pretty complete sound as it is, and you just get to choose which color you'd like. The other advantage, of course, to a dynamic is you can get as loud as you need to, and you're not going to break the dynamic. You'd have to be louder than the space shuttle to destroy a dynamic mic. Dynamics are slow. They smooth out the sound. They muddy it out a bit in terms of transients. That can be fine, depending on the sound. It can be great. There's a reason SM57s have been used for so long for electric guitar. They work pretty well for it. It's really only if you're trying to capture more nuance in your playing, maybe a little bit more of that dynamic response for like palm muting or for rhythm guitar where you're trying to be precise, that using a ribbon plus a condenser, to me, can give you a more lively sound that's jumping out of the speakers a little bit more than you can get with that smooth dynamic. So that's really why you would think about using condensers and ribbons for electric guitar versus dynamics. I really hope you've enjoyed this video/shootout. I don't know if it's going to be super helpful to you, but I hope it is. Again, this is Jesse Cates from the rock band The Sexy Accident. Please check us out if you like the way I talk, I guess. We're always going to be cranking out new exciting stuff from Kansas City, Missouri, sexyaccident.com. Boop, beep, bloop. Bye.